Hello, welcome back to the final episode in season 6, our 60th episode in total. And I just want to take a second to thank all of you wonderful listeners for making the podcast as special as it is. And of course, all the amazing guests that we've had on to share their knowledge, their wisdom, and their stories. This season, especially, we've had some really heartfelt and deep conversations about people's experience in the wedding industry and of getting married. Not all 100% positive, but all truly, truly insightful and full of wisdom for other couples like yourselves who are getting married. So a big thank you to everyone we've had on this show, this season in particular, but across every single episode that we've recorded. We're celebrating with the highlights from the last 9 episodes. So if you're only joining us now, it's going to be a nice little introduction that's going to make you want to rewind and download all our previous episodes. And if you've listened to all the other episodes, it's going to whet your appetite for even more inclusive wedding chat in the upcoming season. So thanks once again. Can't believe we're 60. Enjoy our best bits.
Hi Ross, how you doing?
I'm very good. How are you, Heidi? Have you had a good few weeks?
I've had a good few weeks, yeah. Coming out of the other side of winter always feels good to me. Bit of sunshine, not much, but yeah, it feels good. How about you?
Yeah, I was going to say a bit of sunshine. It's absolutely pelting down at the moment, so it feels like we're going back into winter. But it's really nice to see you after a couple of weeks. And we have been a bit naughty because we have had a bit of a delay in getting this episode together. But I know you wanted to take some time to listen back to all of our wonderful interviews that we featured this season. And we wanted to just relive some of those moments and thank our guests that we've had and just pick out some of our highlights from the past few months.
Yeah, I think it's been an absolutely amazing series. Having listened back myself over the last couple of weeks to some of the interviews, our guests have been so open and honest about their wedding planning experiences, the challenges that they've faced, the highs, the lows. And listening back, I genuinely felt incredibly emotional that they have been so open and honest with us. I mean, how privileged are we? Absolutely amazing.
Exactly. It is a real privilege for people to take the time to come and chat to us about things that aren't always easy to talk about. We talk about weddings being a wonderful time, and they did all have a wonderful wedding in the end, but their experiences weren't 100% positive. So to relive those and delve a little bit deeper into those takes a lot of courage, I think, and to do it in such a public way. Really appreciate that, and we don't undervalue how much it will help other people that are gonna sadly sometimes face those similar hurdles to having the day that they want.
Absolutely. But I think all of our couples have been very strong, and yeah, for whatever challenges they've had, they've either overcome them or gone round them or just thought, what the heck, we'll just ignore them. So but as a series as a whole, I'm incredibly proud, Ross, of what we've achieved. Really am. I think it's a fantastic resource for people that are planning weddings, especially people that are planning weddings that do sit slightly outside of what you see on the whole in mainstream media. Speaking to people that have got disabilities, speaking to people that are planning same-sex weddings, speaking to people that are planning interfaith weddings. You don't hear these stories very often. So again, I feel incredibly privileged that we reached out to these people and they were open and they were happy to talk to us. And yeah, I'm incredibly proud, Ross. I really am. So yeah. Thank you for being my partner on your individual wedding podcast. I'm very proud of what we've achieved.
Absolutely. So shall we kick off? We have to start with our first fabulous couple, which was Heidi and James. And there were so many takeaways from this episode. I just think it was joyous. It was the most joyous, uplifting 45-minute episode that we've ever done.
Yeah.
And I just think the attitude, faced with COVID, being one of the first couples with Down syndrome to get married, and nothing fazed them. I think it was a brilliant episode to start off with because it showed how your attitude and the way you approach challenges has a massive impact on the outcome and how you feel. And I just smile thinking back to them. I can still see their faces when we chatted on Zoom and some of their stories. They were so open. I think what was lovely was how open they were about each other and why they loved each other and what it was they loved about each other, which you don't always get. People are often quite shy or coy or play it down. And it was just so refreshing, I think, to hear them be so themselves. I think that's what we always try and promote, is people being themselves. And of anyone we've interviewed, they were unashamedly themselves, and rightly so. And all the happier and spread more happiness because of it. So if that's not a lesson to take away, then I don't know what is really. And also, I think there was a line when we asked Heidi about trying on her dress, and she said she felt like a princess.
Yeah.
And I just think that is how everyone should feel.
Yeah.
Maybe not, you might not want to feel like a princess, but feeling special, feeling like everything you've dreamed of. I just thought that was a really powerful statement. There was no hesitation. There was no thinking about it. That's how she felt. And it kind of hit home. It's like, that is our intention as wedding suppliers and as on the podcast, is to help everyone feel that great on their wedding day, regardless of any labels that they're attached to or any hurdles that they face. That is the outcome, is how you feel about yourself come the day. And that's what really stood out with that episode for me.
And that the wedding planning experience is a joyful one, and that you're not at any point made to feel less than because you have a disability or you're planning a same-sex wedding. And I think we cover that a number of times throughout. I think that's a common thread throughout all the interviews, is that you're planning a wedding. This should be joyous. It can be stressful. We accept that. But those stresses shouldn't come from the wedding suppliers. Those stresses shouldn't be imposed upon you because people can't accept you for who you are or don't like the way you want to conduct your ceremony. And I do think Heidi and James, as you say, I mean, I laughed so hard throughout that whole interview because they were funny and they knew they were funny. Heidi knew she was funny.
Yeah.
But that that sort of whole sort of instinctive, the first time they met face to face, James went home and wrote his wedding speech.
I know, wow. That's confidence, isn't it? That's confidence and passion and everything you want, really.
And I just, like you, Ross, I thought it was the perfect start to this series because they did absolutely spread love, spread joy, and in the face of, as you say, real adversity. I mean, they were, if not the first wedding out of that first lockdown, they were certainly the second. They were only allowed 8 guests. They weren't allowed to sing. Everybody had to wear masks. They couldn't have a party afterwards. In fact, she's having her party. They're actually celebrating next month. May
cool.
May the 7th, they're having their big reception, wedding celebration. But in the face of all of that, they genuinely just wanted to get married. That was it. That's all they wanted. They were absolutely prepared to accept that they couldn't have all of the things that they'd thought initially they were going to have. And it was really, genuinely about celebrating their love and union. And it was just wonderful. I loved it.
Yeah. And I also think you say in that they just wanted to get married. I think with the couples that we've spoken to, that hasn't been taken for granted because for many of them, it wasn't always possible. So growing up, it wasn't assumed that they'd be able to get married for one reason or another. Yeah. So I think keeping that at the centre is what got a lot of these couples through those hurdles
Yeah.
is that determination, with that appreciation that, what they have and what they're able to cement during a wedding ceremony is what truly matters.
Yeah. And I do think it also does show how, as a society, we have moved on and we have improved. There was, of course, a time when a couple with Down syndrome wishing to get married would have just been told no.
Absolutely.
They didn't have the right, they weren't allowed. And, a couple with Down syndrome wanting to live together as man and wife, it wasn't allowed. It was illegal, which saying it out loud just it seems unbelievable, but that that was the case. And so I do think it is an indication of how, as a society, we have improved and moved on. That's not to say there aren't huge improvements to be made, because you and I both know there are. And again, we cover a lot of that in this series. But yes, to see that was an indication that we as a society are learning, moving on, and getting better at acceptance and inclusion, and that gives me nice tingly feeling.
James, what was it that you liked about Heidi?
Just falling in love with her personality. That's the actual main thing.
Oh, lovely.
She's very bubbly. You're a very bubbly girl. And Heidi, what was it that you liked about James?
Oh, how much time do we have? Well, I don't like about James. It's the things I love about James.
Of course.
The thing I love about him is his enthusiasm and his determination to get the girl. Because I remember, straight after our first date, he went home to write down his wedding speech.
Oh, wow.
I know!
Wow.
He'll set it up with his winning smile.
So, for me, I really wanted to talk about Greg and Ewan's wedding. So Greg and Ewan, you actually photographed their wedding, didn't you, Ross?
I did. I was very lucky. I got to photograph all the goings on of their wedding, of which there were many, yes.
Yeah. So they spoke about planning their same-sex wedding. And they did encounter quite a few challenges and things that annoyed them along the way about the attitude of suppliers towards same-sex couples. And I think at one point Greg had to point out to a venue that there wasn't a bride in the party, after they insisted on persistently talking about the bridal suite and what the bride will do, and these two burly gentlemen was stood in front of her going, "Where's the bride?" And some people might go, "Well, it's just a term, it's just this, it's just that." But as Greg said, we're paying these people good money, and so we should be seen, we should be accepted, adjustments should be made, a better understanding, training, whatever it takes, to accept that, terminology matters. It affects the way people feel. And again, we go back to, this whole planning process, and, this is supposed to be joyous. You're not supposed to sort of feel like you're not being seen, you're not being represented. So I loved the story of their wedding, because I think those guys really did push some boundaries. I think they did insist on, the things that they did differently in the grand scheme of things weren't that different, but they came up against a venue that was a little reluctant to do things in any way different from the way that they normally did it, and even moving the seating arrangements so that their ceremony could be conducted in the round rather than everybody sat at their backs while they took their vows and made their pledges. Their venue weren't happy about those things, and I applauded them for sticking to their guns and saying no.
Yeah,
we're paying you, it's just moving chairs, move the chairs. So yeah, the thing that really hit home when we spoke to them was language, and how outmoded and outdated a lot of our industry still is. And it does bring you up short, because you kind of chug along thinking, oh yes, everything's getting better, and everything is getting better, but not quickly enough to represent same-sex couples and same-sex weddings. And I said to you when we were chatting before we started recording, Ross, wedding fairs, until they'd spoken to us about how alienating wedding fairs are for grooms, I'd never really thought about it before. But when it's pointed out, you are really brought up short. You know, the whole setup is for brides and the bridal party. And I think Greg said, you know, when you walk into these places as two men planning your wedding, you stand there and think, are grooms involved in the planning of weddings at all? Because if this is anything to go by, no, you know, you're pointed to the bar and told that's where the blokes go. You head off over there, prop the bar up, let the ladies get on with it. And it, you know, when a spotlight is shone on that, you suddenly realise how outdated that is.
Yeah, totally. In fact, wedding marketing in general, it's all about talking to the bride, and yeah, and more and more couples are doing, whether they're LGBTQ or, you know, a so-called straight couple. It's not the case that, you know, the men just hand over their card and the women go out and shop to their heart's content. It doesn't happen like that anymore. Very, very rarely, and certainly not the couples that I work with. It's very a team effort, and I think the whole experience is better for it. I think there's less stress involved and less overwhelm, and this whole idea of being in it together is much more exciting. The whole process, the whole journey is much more fulfilling, and I think the wedding industry needs to catch up and catch on to that a little bit quicker than it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're planning a life together, and, you know, obviously the wedding is the start of that, that your lives won't be like that. It won't be, right, okay, blue jobs and pink jobs, and, you know, that's not
exactly, that's not how it's done.
That's not what modern relationships are like. You know, you do share everything, or you know most modern relationships you do, and so to sort of like set that precedent from the start. No. The men go and drink beer, and the ladies pick out the I don't know, the flowers or the cake. So it is very antiquated. I'm finding increasingly that my clients are involving their partners, their male partners, in choosing their wedding outfits, and you know, the traditional bridal party is no more. You know, it's a mixture of men and women, not always, but, you know, increasingly so. And so it just means that the wedding industry is a little out of step now, I think.
It is, and I think couples like you and Greg and LGBTQ weddings in general are helping the industry as a whole break down some of those stereotypes. You know, for you and Greg, there were no brides at the wedding, so there was no bridal suite, there was no bridal party, and hopefully it stops you assuming that there's going to be in any wedding, you know. So I do think we need to be grateful to couples like you and Greg who do say no, or hold on, can you change that language, or, you know, this isn't a big deal, what we're asking for isn't a huge deal, can you just respect our wishes?
Yeah.
You know, it's not always easy to do, and it's not always comfortable to do, but it's couples like you and Greg that force those changes for future couples.
Yes.
So I think, you know, we're grateful to them for sharing their story, but also for what they did at the time of planning their wedding, and not just accepting things as they were. And I think that's an important takeaway, is not to, you know, if somebody says, well, that's just the way it is. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be anymore.
Yeah.
So that's very lazy. If somebody's telling you that's just how it works.
Yeah.
It works however you want it to now.
Yeah, absolutely. Great interview.
We were looking at some venues. I have very little. It turned out had very little patience for it. We were at one venue, and this person who was showing us around just kept saying bride and bridal party repeatedly, and I just got to the point when
even when you were there in front of them,
in front of her, being taken around, and she just could not stop saying bridal party. And I just got to the point where I said, look, enough. You've got to stop saying this. We're not brides.
Didn't she was pointing out like where the bridal suite would be?
Yeah.
And we were like, what about this doesn't add up? It was kind of like that was her.
That was the first time
programmed.
I kind of said something, and after that I sort of had a zero tolerance approach to it. And immediately correct people.
Which is fair enough, I think.
But I think the whole industry is geared up towards straight couples. We went to a number of wedding fairs, one of which was the gay wedding fair. I think you were at that.
I was at that one, yeah. I'd already met you prior to that, didn't I? I didn't,
And that was great because it was just geared towards, I mean, it shouldn't have to be this way, but it just was geared towards gay couples. And the big difference was, I remember we went to a wedding fair at Islington Town Hall, and it's all about brides. And it just made me wonder whether grooms are even involved in straight couples, whether grooms are even involved in the planning of it. There was just nothing, really.
Or there'll be a bar, and guys, you go and sit in the bar. Well,
I guess that's maybe what it is. It's a big day for the bride, but I mean, I was grateful for the gay wedding fair for that reason, because you just didn't have to put up with that.
And then we had Juliet, was another lady that really sprang to mind. And I felt quite sad for Juliet in a way. I really sensed she was wonderful and her sense of humour, but this sort of frustration was sort of the theme throughout. This kind of expectation from the industry, but also her friends, as to, because she was getting married later on in life, why would she want to go to the effort and to have all the frills and spills that younger couples would? It was really disheartening, really, to hear that. To go to a venue and assume that you're the mother of the bride. It's all these assumptions, isn't it, that just take away so much enjoyment. And it really got me thinking, because I think it's very different to Ewan and Greg, in that Ewan and Greg had forced change, or they stood up and made a stand, and they didn't accept certain things. Whereas I think with Juliet, as inspiring as she was, I think she felt there was a sense of what can be done. What else can I do to make life easier? Her choice of outfit seemed limited. It wasn't really what she wanted. She was sort of pigeonholed into one thing or another, neither of which she wanted to do. And again, it just made me think we need to do more. We need to see more people like Juliet represented. It should be the norm. I think you spoke about it on the podcast as well. You sort of scroll through social media, and whenever there is a styled shoot or a wedding of a more mature couple, you do stop scrolling because you're not used to see it.
You see, as soon as you were saying that, Ross, that came into my mind when you were saying we need to see more. I thought, there's one. There's one styled shoot of a mature couple. They've both got grey hair. They look styled to the max and they look amazing. One. And yet, you and I both know that there are more than one couple who are in their 50s or 60s or 70s who are planning a wedding.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, financially, apart from anything else, financially, if you're a wedding supplier, get on this.
Well, yeah, exactly. It makes sense, doesn't it? Right. I know people really miss it. Really miss a trick with that, if nothing else. It's just that age-old idea that beauty has an age limit, that class has an age limit, that style yeah, why assume that someone getting married later in life would not want to spend money, would not want the beautiful things in life? Not that it's all about that, but I think there's this assumption that you get to a certain age and they won't spend money, or they won't wear something that's really stylish, or they're, I hate this whole idea of a portfolio couple, or a couple that you'd want on your website, which I don't subscribe to anyway. But it just amazes me, really. I mean, I've got an older couple on my website, and I've got a couple of more mature couples this year, which I'm really looking forward to. But people do notice it, and people do love it. And this whole notion that if you put a certain demographic online, you're only going to attract that demographic. I just think that's an outdated idea as well, really. I get that you sort of, someone said, people buy what they see. But actually, I've had younger couples book me because they've seen this picture of this older couple and they've fallen in love with it. Because if nothing else, it says a lot about me and what I value, that I deem those people worthy of going on my wall or on my website.
Yeah.
So I think it says a lot about the vendors themselves. If you can't see yourself represented by anyone, then obviously that's very challenging. It's very hard. But, if there's a product or service you love, but you still can't see yourself, what does that really say about how they value you as a potential client?
Exactly. And I know one of the bridal boutiques that I stock up here in the Northwest, it's a Cheshire bridal boutique, Rock the Frock. And Helen, the boutique owner, got her mum, who is, I think, in her late 50s, early 60s, to model some of the wedding dresses. And the pictures that she's posted of her mum on her social media, the reach that they get and the interactions that they get, because she looks amazing for a start, but it stops people in their tracks and it makes them go, oh,
yeah.
Oh, you're not just about skinny, white, blonde, blue eyes, and weddings, I mean, we know weddings are an incredibly diverse, mixed bag. And people want to see themselves. They want to see themselves represented. And I think that's what Juliet was saying. I just want to see myself represented.
Yeah.
I just want to see.
I think there's a whole kind of trend of alternative weddings or non-weddingy weddings and being a bit different. And sometimes I think she's got short hair, she's wearing a leather jacket on top of her dress, which is cool as it looks. I'm like, is that it? Really? It's not that different.
Is that as
you
good
just
as
got leather jackets and the boots on. I mean, whoa, maybe if she was 30 years older and you showed her, and that's more powerful than trying to make out you're really edgy and different when actually you're not. So I think this whole idea of sort of being a rebel is not actually very rebellious at all in what you see. I think I've seen it all before.
So the onus is on us then, Ross. The onus is
it
on
is.
us.
The onus is on us.
We need to get some representation going. You need to take those photos of that couple. Juliet is going to be one of my brides. I'm very excited about it. She's going to be wearing something very glorious. But yes, I'm with you. I felt really sad that she was actually approached, I think, by a friend or a family member who said, are you really going to spend this much money on a wedding? She's like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. Sod off, do what I want. Yeah.
Well, you haven't got long left. Why would you?
It's all the more reason, isn't it?
Why would you waste your money? I think, as you say, Juliet's was one of the interviews that we did where you did think, we need to be doing better.
I'm 56, happily say that. Mark's 66, and when it just almost straight away there is nothing to base the wedding on. There's no reference points. If you think about it, if you look at any bridal, and I belong to them all because of what I do for a living. There is no reference, or hardly any, I'd say it's 0.000% to older couples. And if there is, and I can't even say I've seen, there's been one photo somebody shared on Instagram recently, and they are very stylized shots. But apart from that, there is nothing. And that goes right the way across the industry as well. You know, from finding a venue and asking if we're looking for our children to the whole outfit of what I'm going to wear. It is easier for men, I think, but if you start looking, and I can understand it's an economic, you know, it's part of, you know, your business plan. You're not going to necessarily look for the sort of outfits a woman would want to wear who's older. But there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
And you know, it just do not exist. It's all that very I'll say American, with no disrespect to anyone who's American, that very sort of, again, I say mother of the bride, that long navy or burgundy dresses.
Yeah.
And or frocks with a certain, and I love vintage clothes, with a certain, you know, you need to look like a bombshell or something. You need to be all sort of saucy like a 50s singer. There's nothing in between. And once the wedding industry's got onto a trend theme, and you know, it's all the boho bride look, how the hell does that relate to anyone over 25 who's not 6 stone anyhow? So it's you come into ageism and size, and that's pretty much across the board. That's from everything. It's like, who are the flowers for? Well, actually, for me, do I feel a bit silly having flowers? Because flowers and the symbolism as of youth, fertility, growth, and everything. And here I am, and it does become very difficult. And we've had it.
Another of our interviews that, actually listening back, I did actually shed a bit of a tear. I got quite emotional listening to it for a number of reasons. And it was when we spoke to Masara. About her interfaith wedding. So Masara is a Muslim woman, and she was marrying Roy, her partner, who she described as a scientist. And you know, he doesn't really. He was brought up as a Christian, but he doesn't sort of, you know, he's not a practicing Christian. And she described their relationship, and there was a real joy in that, and that I found that so uplifting. And you know, he was a quiet man, and she desperately wanted him to ask her out, and she, you know, she knew she'd found the one, and there was a real sort of joy to their relationship. But there was that moment when she introduced Roy to her family, and she described it as knowing they both knew it was going to be different from when Roy introduced her to his family. And you know, when she met Roy's dad, he was absolutely enchanted by the fact that she was wearing an Indian dress, and he wanted her to twirl, and he wanted her to touch it, and he was really, you know, excited by the whole experience. And when Roy met Masara's family, her brother and sister are practicing Muslim, and they just felt that they couldn't accept him as anything more than her partner. So when it came to the wedding and the marriage, they couldn't accept him as her husband. And that moment, just, you listen to somebody say that out loud, and you just think, I suppose you kind of put yourself in their shoes and think, what impact does that have on your relationship, having to make that decision, having to think, we're going to get married, we're going to do it anyway, whether or not he is accepted as my husband. I don't know, I found that really, really hard to listen to. But then I also found it utterly amazing that Masara has just come to terms with that and accepted that she still has a relationship with her brother and sister. She still loves them, they still love her. It's just that they won't accept Roy as a husband. And she's just thought, well, actually, my relationship with them is more important. And so I'm just going to have to accept that. That's just something.
Yeah, it's that it was quite powerful how things aren't perfect, but she's okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, she is married. She does still have a relationship with her brother and sister. It's not perfect. It's not what she wants it to be, but she's all right. She's okay. And I think that would resonate with a lot of people, because not everything in life works out as we'd want it to. There's not always a happy ending. So just being at peace with how things are, I think, is quite a valuable life lesson to us all.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
And that sort of attitude of acceptance,
Yeah.
almost, in a situation. And it is tinged with sadness, and you do sort of put yourself in that position and wonder what it would be like.
Yeah.
But again, for Masara to come on and share that was huge, and you know, something I really appreciate her doing, her honesty and her, you know, how deep she went into that. Was really moving, and you know, we really valued her sharing her story.
Yeah, and as you say, we're sort of trained, aren't we, to sort of expect the resolution and happy ending, and everything was all right in the end, and they came to the wedding and it was okay, and it's almost what you want. That's what you want to hear. Tell me everything was all right with Sarah, and she couldn't. But even more powerful for the fact that she, you know, she didn't have our sort of Hollywood film ending, but she did have something that she could live with. I just thought she was amazing. I thought she and Roy, you know, were for that, absolutely amazing. And like you say, I feel so very, very, very honoured that she shared that story with us, because that's real strength.
And then with my family, it was a bit more formal. We knew there would be struggle with that, because Roy was the first. I refer to him as blue and blonde rather than Caucasian. I hate that word. But he was the first blue and blonde person in our family. And the other issue we had, that our family is quite split in their religious beliefs. So we grew up in a Muslim home, but it wasn't a very strict religiously, but as we kind of went to university and went our own separate ways as such, two of my siblings, a brother and a sister, became practicing Muslims, and they, you know, we have struggles with that. And I know you haven't asked me yet, but the struggles were that they won't accept Roy as my husband. And it is difficult, and it's, you know, it's something we've come to terms with, because they still love me and I love them, and they're my brother and sister, but actually on a day-to-day basis they're not part of my living. If they were, I think it couldn't work. But also they have, you know, they accept me, but they accept Roy as my partner or boyfriend, so they, you know, that's uncomfortable. And I didn't know that at that stage when we were first introducing Roy to the family, but I thought they'd be a bit softer and kinder, but they weren't, and they haven't been, to be honest. We're 5 years on now.
And we had Martin. I know you weren't there for...
I missed Martin.
You missed Martin. We have to have Martin back on, because Martin was hilarious.
He was.
Martin was hilarious during recording and afterwards. In fact, some of the things he said afterwards, probably good that it wasn't on the podcast, but it would have been very entertaining. But again, that was so insightful, and it showed it doesn't take a lot of effort to be more inclusive. The things he talked about his work doing British Sign Language interpreting, and the fact that his husband is deaf, and obviously that's a first language. So, you know, even I didn't realize that, you know, for many deaf people growing up, they weren't all given the access to learning to read and write. So it's not always as simple as just giving them, you know, a piece of paper with writing on, because that's not their first language. And that was something I'd never really thought about, to be honest. I've had the privilege of not needing to think about it. And also what he was saying, being a celebrant that brings that element of interpretation in, but not wanting to take work away from other deaf people that would like to be celebrants. Yeah. And sort of finding that balance, which we've talked about before from a range of perspectives of being inclusive, but also not taking away business or clients from people within that same community. So I thought that was really, really powerful. And also how he wanted to try and keep elements of his personal life separate to what he does. And I think it's quite interesting. And, we do put a lot of who we are into our business in the wedding industry. And it can be quite draining, and it can be quite hard to maintain that balance. And I think, again, someone opening up about that was really, really powerful.
Didn't he, I mean, obviously I wasn't there for the interview, but didn't he say that, so his partner is deaf, and signing is their first language at home. That's how they communicate through signing.
Yes.
So I can imagine that must be quite strange for him to then sort of almost commercialize something that but then people do that through spoken word as well, people
so it was really interesting. And just remembering when we look at if you're a couple getting married and you're looking at prospective vendors, how much they do bring. It's not just what they're offering in black and white terms, it's not just offering photos being taken or a headpiece. All the life and experience they've had before goes into that business, to the service they provide. All his experience on stage and doing sign language and as a drag artist, and all those life experiences that you have, that's what we all bring. So I always tell couples it's important to look behind the brand and look at the person and see if you can connect with those people. That's more powerful than a statement on a website or a little soundbite on social media. And I think Martin really personified that when he talked about what he'd done before. And his sense of humor. I think sense of humor is massive in the wedding industry. You just knew he would, whatever happened on the day, it would be fun with Martin. But like you said, just little things, simple little things, like they did a video teaching the vendors a few little signs, how to sign the different choices in the menu, or little things about positioning again the chairs in a round so that there aren't people at the back and people at the front, and all those little things that people that feel marginalised aren't asking for mountains to be moved, really. It's no effort at all to be a little bit more inclusive to all communities.
I mean, signing's a really interesting one, I think, because obviously we've just had a Strictly Come Dancing season where the winner was from the deaf community, Rose, and the adaptations that they made were really, really impressive, I thought, to include somebody who had a hearing impairment. But also showed how easy it is to include somebody with a hearing impairment. And the judges and the audience and the professionals all learned a few simple signs. And we signed a lot at home when my daughter was younger, because her language, due to her learning disability, came very late. And I still remember all of our signs. And I was asking my daughter the other day, can you remember how to ask for more cake, please? And it's still, especially when it's cake, it's still there. But they're just they're really, really simple signs. And you only need a handful. Where, how, what, please, thank you. You don't need that many signs. And I think, as a venue or as a supplier, if you've just got 20 signs in your back pocket, you know, you're well on the way to offering real inclusivity to the deaf community. It's, you know, it's small adaptations, and you know, they mount up to an awful lot. And I think that is, again, the message that we got time and time again from our guests was that, you know, we're not asking for the world. We're asking for you to change your language. We're asking for you to not make outdated assumptions about our relationship. We're asking for you to move the chairs. That still makes me laugh. Just move the bloody chairs. So they, you know, these are very, very small adaptations, and they add up to a lot. Remind me again, what was Martin's drag name? I've forgotten.
Maria Hertz.
Oh, Maria Hertz. How can I forget? Hertz.
Fabulous.
It is fabulous. It is fabulous. Honestly, go and give him a follow. If you don't follow him, go and give him a follow.
Foxy celebrant, yeah, he's worth it. He's a good giggle.
He's great value. I loved listening to that interview, and I was absolutely gutted that I couldn't do it.
It all depends if it's a couple who are deaf, or it's so a family member or a friend who's deaf and attending the wedding. But you would need to book interpreters. So let's just talk about interpreters for the moment. At a wedding ceremony, if you're going to be using interpreters, you would probably, depending on the number of people, you could probably get away with one, but ideally you probably need a minimum of two.
Okay.
So from my experience, my own wedding, because Neil's deaf, we had one interpreter who was stood behind me off my shoulder, interpreting directly to Neil everything that we had a registrar, unfortunately, but anyway, the registrar was saying. I'm sorry for any registrars that might be listening. And then we had another interpreter who was interpreting for the congregation, audience, gathering.
Guests. For the guests.
Yeah. For the guests. So that worked well until it came to the I do's, and Neil kept saying I do to this interpreter behind it. I had to remind him he was saying I do to me. Just trying to think of another setup where maybe the couple isn't deaf or doesn't use sign language, and it's probably a family member or a
relative or friend. Yeah.
Then you would just need one for the guests there at the front.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on the setup. It depends on the venue, and what I would really, if you can, I would try and do away with the end-on kind of setup, that kind of theatre style setup where there's a couple at the front and all the seats are in rows going back, because that isn't accessible at all. And I would try and maybe look at a horseshoe configuration, or perhaps in a circle, something like that, with a couple in the middle or at the end of that horseshoe. That works well as well, because then guests, if there are other deaf or BSL users sat around, they can all talk to each other easily as well. So yeah, and then what we did for our wedding is Neil and I made a little video of basic signs.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So which we sent out to the venue. So all of our suppliers, we sent out to the venues and the wedding planner, and so they were able to use basic signs to guests and to Neil as well, and to the waiting staff as well when it came round, and saying if you want a coffee or a top up, or if you were having the pork or the vegetarian or whatever it was, can't even remember. Oh my god.
And then we spoke to Lisa Vine, and she was a really interesting interview, because she was planning her own wedding as a lesbian woman, and she is also a trainer, an inclusivity trainer for LGBTQ plus inclusivity, and she had worked with a number of organisations. So she'd worked in health and she'd worked in education, just really sort of training organisations about better inclusivity. So she was coming at our interview from two quite different angles, but made for a really interesting interview for that, because obviously she's got her professional hat on, and then she's got her I'm Lisa planning my wedding hat on. And some of the stuff that she said did have me laughing out loud, because they are so absurdly outdated. Like the DJ at the wedding fair who told her partner that she needed to have brides on her marketing banner because brides sell weddings. I can barely say it. Stood there with his arms folded and his legs out wide. You can just picture him, can't you?
You can. I've met him. I've met, versions of him countless times.
Brides sell weddings. So yeah, some of that, you listen and go, oh, but it's so awful that it does make you laugh. But yeah, I found her really interesting because, again, she was just talking about small changes. We asked her about advice for wedding suppliers, because I think there's a fear, and we discussed this in the interview, people who feel like they're entering territory that they're not very well educated around, rather than getting the education or thinking about, okay, so how do I make my business and my work more inclusive, bury their head in the sand, because they're frightened at the end of the day. They're frightened, they're scared that they're going to do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, cause offence inadvertently, use the wrong terminology. And Lisa was just saying that she hears that a lot when she's doing her training, when she's worked with the police and health professionals. She hears that a lot, and she was saying that actually you're just talking about small changes, and a lot of the time it's just language. It's not using sort of gender specific language. Instead of in your contracts as a supplier, don't say the bride and groom, say the couple. And you think, wow, that's not rocket science, is it? That's not hard to just change from the bride and groom, that assumption that you've got a man and a woman getting married, to the couple. It's, and when she broke it down like that, you did start thinking, this isn't hard. This is just going through your website and making sure that you're not referring to the bride, because there might be two brides, or the groom, because there might be two grooms. And yeah, you quickly start to realize that you don't have to make very big changes or go through a massive program of learning, or this is really, really basic stuff. Basic stuff.
And that whole positive intention and empathy I really liked.
Yes.
Not worrying about saying the wrong thing. If you're doing it with positive intention and empathy, then you'll be received in the right way, and not being afraid to ask questions, the right questions, sympathetically, but not feeling like you're going to be berated for not knowing something if you're generally asking to understand something better. And I think that's really important, that people don't feel afraid that they're going to be shouted down for getting it wrong. If people generally are trying to do better or generally don't know, it's not going to help them by just shouting them down. If they're trying to learn, then work with them, meet them halfway. But also with Lisa, that she talks about the whole spectrum of LGBTQ, and I think sometimes, certainly for me, when I talk about that, I'm very focused on my experience is obviously same sex, and obviously it's not exclusively about that. That's my lived experience, and most of my couples, when I do LGBTQ weddings. It is two members of the same sex who identify as gay. But you know, her example of someone who was transgender in a bridal shop and how they might feel self-conscious getting undressed in front of somebody or having to explain certain things. So it's just, you know, for us as much as anyone else, remembering that LGBTQ covers a broad spectrum. And I think Lisa touched on it, and I saw it online the other day, you know, even if you seemingly got a man, you know, what appears to be a man and what appears to be a woman getting married, don't assume that that's, you know, their born gender and things like that. You can't just say, oh, that's a straight couple and that's a gay couple. It's so much more nuanced, and you know, that's something that we all need to remember as well. And it's just, you know, by changing little things like language, you're not going to cause offense. You're going to be more inclusive, because I think we still do make assumptions. Well, man and a woman, that's a straight couple. Two women, that's a gay couple. And you know, it's not like that. So I think Lisa was
she gave
great.
the example, didn't she? And then you know, she and her partner checked into a hotel on their way to a holiday destination. Two women checking into a room. They'd booked a double room. The guy behind the counter on reception said, "Oh, did you want two singles?" And they said, "No." No, we'd like a double, thank you very much. And it was just that assumption that he'd made, that he saw two women and thought, oh no, you know, we've messed up, we've given them a double, and obviously
and then you put them in a position, I've been in that position, where you have to explicitly say, no, we want a double room. And who else wants to say, no, we want to sleep? You know, you're effectively saying, no, we sleep together. You know, why would you want to tell that to someone you've never met when you've just checked in on holiday? Do you know what? It's you're putting them in that position of having to explicitly say you're different to someone else.
And when she was talking about booking appointments at bridal boutiques and feeling that, you know, to make herself feel more comfortable, she should phone ahead and explain that there isn't a groom. So, you know, when I come for my try on, please don't ask me, you know, about the groom and, you know, what will the groom be wearing. And again, I felt pleased that she felt more comfortable having done that, but sad that she had to. Because again, it's that kind of, you know, you want to feel seen, represented, understood. You know, you don't want to have to explain yourself. It applies to so many things, but that sort of made me feel a bit. I mean, she was fine about it. She said, look, you know, for me, it's just, that's my life. And you said the same thing in that interview, Ross, you know, that's my life. That's, you know, I do take for granted that you have to check ahead and make sure people are okay with my sexuality and my relationship, and because that's not my lived experience. When I heard that made me feel really sad.
And I think I said in the interview it was quite not reassuring, but sometimes I think, you know, at my age, am I putting my own sort of experiences that are quite probably dated now onto a society that's more liberal and more open? But talking to her, you know, there are still problems, there are still barriers. So it's not me trying to make it negative or basing it on something that happened to me 20 years ago. Those things are a lot better, but they're still happening. So it kind of, although it was sad and it shouldn't be the case, at least I know that what we're doing is still needed. You know, we're not.
And actually, interviews like that one with Lisa really gave me food for thought, because dealing as I do predominantly with brides, I up until that point, I would say to brides who came to visit me for consultations, I would ask them about their dress. I would say, you know, have you picked out a dress yet? And I was already on the way to changing that, but Lisa's interview really sort of pushed that to the front of my mind, because not, you know, why am I assuming that a bride who comes in to pick out a hair accessory is going to wear a dress? Because actually, if I'd used my common sense and looked at half my brides, so many are wearing trouser suits and jumpsuits, and you know, that just that assumption, that it is an outdated assumption that, oh, you are a bride, therefore you wear a dress. You are a groom, and therefore you wear a suit. Actually, no, I almost swore then. But you know, why is that the case? Why is that the assumption? So thanks to Lisa, I now always ask about the outfit. Have you picked out an outfit? And it's a really quick, easy change to language. Swap dress for outfit. Swap bride and groom for couple. It's, you know, and language does matter. And that was my big takeaway from Lisa's interview, really, is again, small changes mean a big difference. Interesting, Lisa, what you said about phoning ahead and asking whether or not a wedding dress shop is an inclusive environment. And does it make you sad that you feel that you have to do that, or do you think that's a positive thing to do that and make yourself feel comfortable in advance?
That, Heidi, is a very interesting question, because I think that's not just applicable to the wedding industry. And this probably says something about me and my own personality and my own insecurities and my background, but actually that, to a certain extent, that's kind of my whole life. So when you ask me, does that make me feel sad? My gut reaction was, well, no, because it's just part and parcel of life.
I totally relate to that. I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
Like, and, you know, like, even, I mean, this is by the by, really, but like, even like 5 years ago, when I went abroad with my now ex girlfriend, we stayed in a hotel before we flew to Canada near Gatwick, because it was a really early flight. Being in Leicestershire, it's quite far. And, you know, we booked a hotel room in advance. And when I got there to check in, the man at reception looked at me and looked at my ex and went, "Would you like a twin room?"
Yeah.
I'm like, to be fair, like maybe he thinks we're sisters. All right, fine. But would he have said that? And actually, I watched him after me in the queue. I was going to say, would he have said that to somebody he perceived to be male and female? And there was a youngish man and woman behind us in the queue. So then I watched afterwards, and he didn't ask them that, because he doesn't assume they're brothers and sisters, like brother and sister, does he? And it's that, yeah, it's not that I wouldn't necessarily ring ahead now with a hotel. Like, I'd just book it, and then, you know, and in that instance, I was like, actually, no, I'd quite like a double room, please. And he was all like, oh, okay. But I guess, like you were saying, Heidi, about it being, when you're planning a wedding, it's you want it to be for all the stress that it is, because it, you know, it is stressful times. You know, actually, you want those kind of moments when you're picking food and dresses or outfits. My case, a dress, but outfits. When you're picking decorations, if you want decorations, whatever you're picking for your day, you want it to be exciting and you want it to be inclusive. And so, did I feel sad that I had to ring? No, because it's so part of my normality, but it did make me feel loads better.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and actually, I think Wendy, bless her, actually felt quite a rapport with me because when I came in, I think she just sort of oddly saw me like her own daughter. And then when I went in for my second appointment to try on other dresses, because I didn't get a dress the first time, she came down the stairs because she was helping somebody else, and I was with her colleague, and I was wearing the dress I then bought. And she just went, she put her hands on the side of her face, and she just went, "Oh, my baby." And then two random women like wandered in for their appointment and were like, "You look amazing. Are you buying that one?" And I was like, "I am now."
And then we had Charlotte, who came and talked to us about making weddings more eco-friendly, or, you know, kinder to the planet. and sustainable. And that was a real eye-opener for me. I was quite surprised. Maybe I was a bit naive. Charlotte's obviously somebody that's very passionate about sustainability and that sort of part of her everyday life. And yet she found it really hard to find any resources to help her plan a sustainable wedding.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong, she gave so many valuable tips and so much wisdom for couples planning a sustainable wedding. But I was surprised that she faced as many challenges as she did.
Yeah.
So it seems to be a hot topic, sustainability, and I see it on social media, but we're not doing enough, really. I don't think. I think, what I picked up was don't try to be perfect. And I think that's a huge thing with climate change and everything. People tend to think, well, if I can't possibly do all of those things, so I won't do any. And I think it's really important that any little thing adds up. If we're all doing lots of little things, it adds up. So I liked her take that, you have to weigh up what you're prepared to compromise on from a sustainable point of view, and what you might say, actually, no, I really, I know this is not the most sustainable option, but it really means a lot to me. And I thought that was a really sensible approach.
Yeah.
And just asking that question of, can these elements be used again? I think if you approached every part of the wedding with, can this be used again, from the outfits to the phases, to the decorations, all those things, can this be used again? It would make such a huge impact on the decisions that you made and the purchases that you invested in. And I thought that was really powerful, actually.
Yeah. And again, things that you sort of think, oh my God, that's so obvious, but nobody does it. Like actually asking your guests what they will eat or what they don't want to eat, so that you don't end up wasting food.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't like, I don't know, tomatoes and you fill their plate full of roasted tomato, and you just think that's such an obvious thing, rather than sort of picking out a very sort of set menu and everybody's got to eat the same thing. If Bob over there doesn't like that, why would you waste food on a plate and it's not going to get eaten? And you just went, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So many.
There is so much food wasting at weddings. So I finished the night and couples are begging me to take some food away because there's so many. They're like, have some cake, do have the buffet, there's loads left over, we won't eat it all. And I think, that's such a shame. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of food. Yeah.
Food bank down the road that'll rip your arm off for those.
Absolutely. And maybe, that's a question you'd say, look, is there the option, if it doesn't get eaten, that there's somewhere we can take it at the end of the night or something? But yeah, Charlotte was great. She, like I said, she had lots of ideas. She was quite determined, I think. I think it highlighted how hard it would be if you came from it not knowing a lot about sustainability at all. I think she, from the start, it was almost not, I think I asked the question, at what point did you sit down and sort of decide we're going to have a sustainable wedding? But I think it was so much part of her life that it was a no-brainer that it was going to be. I think for a lot of people, they would have to sit down and say, oh, okay, have we thought about sustainability? Because, to be honest, do any of us live in the most sustainable way? Probably not.
Yeah.
So I just think anyone less knowledgeable and less sort of focused on that issue would really struggle at the moment as things stand. I think
you hit the nail on the head. That sort of, she gave us, that was such a gem. Can this be used again? Or can I use something that's been used again? I mean, her wedding dress was a pre-loved wedding dress. Her bridesmaids' dresses she bought secondhand. There were so many things that she sourced that had been used before. But, a dress that's been worn once is still a designer dress that's been worn once. It was a beautiful dress. And I think that was so insightful that, can it be used again?
And with the outfit, I actually love that, you know, what she was saying, that idea that somebody else gets to wear it on their day, and then that sort of outfit has its sort of story of its own, and it's other people sharing the joy and the feeling it brings. I think that's actually quite a powerful thing to do, rather than buy something once and then shove it in a cupboard and not fit into it 20 years later, you know.
There's so many, you know, you can hire outfits. You don't even have to buy, you can hire outfits. So that was my real takeaway from that interview, was that, you know, you don't have to, like you say, you don't have to be perfect, but if you just have that one thing in your head, can this be used again? And I've been planning, it's a big birthday party in our house this weekend. It's my daughter's delayed 18th birthday party. And we're hiring somewhere, and there's lots of stuff going on, but actually sort of thinking about the decor, thinking about, right, okay, we've got this whole venue to decorate. It's not that difficult to spend a little bit more time when you're doing that shopping, thinking, right, okay, so we don't want single-use plastic. So, you know, all of the cups and the plates are all, you know, sugarcane byproduct, blah, 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 blah. Not any more expensive than plastic, and all biodegradable. So things like that, you know, and it all looks prettier than plastic anyway. You know, plastic's a pretty ugly commodity. So it doesn't, and again, that interview stayed with me when I was looking at what I was buying for the party. I was constantly thinking, you know, oh, balloons, I'm not going to get balloons. You know, they were offered to me as a matter of course by the people that are providing our light up letters for the event. You know, do you want the balloon arch? And I was like, no. Very good. I can say no. And it is, it's just because that's a whole heap of plastic right there. You have a balloon arch at the wedding, and you know, you're smashing through those targets. So I thought the amount of information in that interview was phenomenal. So if you're planning a sustainable wedding, that's definitely the one. Charlotte's interview, definitely the one to listen to.
Absolutely.
You know, when it came to our decorations coming from them being paper instead of plastic, that kind of thing, all sorts of stuff. They're from the start. I think from the beginning, we kind of originally, first thing we did was thought about, where is it going to be? Our families are and family and friends are all over the country. So I live in Lincoln, or Neil lives here now as well. But his family's from Worcester. I have family in Buckinghamshire, Norfolk, Wales, all over the place. And so we thought, right, where's the place where the least number of people have to travel? This is a convenience to them, but also, you know, a good thing for us in terms of sustainability, that fewer people are traveling. So we went for Worcestershire. Fewer people were going to have to travel, and we kind of just went from there with everything we did. As a bonus, if you're not someone who's into sustainability, a lot of the things that we did also saved us money. You know, in terms of, my wedding dress wasn't brand new. My wedding dress was secondhand. Our wedding rings were made from recycled gold. We did lots of things. As I said, we looked into the kind of waste stuff and decided not to do favours on the tables, because we kept thinking about, right, well, what are we going to do? But you know, that just produces lots of packaging. People will use that little thing and then they're going to throw it away. We thought, right, well, what would people prefer? Would they prefer some extra beers on the table? Probably. So the budget kind of went towards that. My shoes came from eBay, so my shoes were secondhand, etc. There were certain things I didn't want to compromise on. In fact, I don't think I saw it as a compromise. The fact that my wedding dress, somebody else had it before. Those dresses are so beautiful that sometimes it feels sad that they only get worn once.
So, wow. We've seriously,
we done good, Heidi.
I'm really, honestly, Ross, check us out. We're so good at this.
I think that we were so intentional with this season, and it's really paid off, I think. And I think it's definitely the way we're going to move forward with the podcast, and it's been really well received. So we will be taking a little break, because weddings are back in all their glory, and all the shoots are kicking in.
Absolutely. But I mean, if you're listening and you're planning a wedding and finding your own challenges in that planning journey that you'd like to share with us, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. We're already lining up interviews, as you say, for the next season. We're hopefully speaking to an organisation that's looking specifically at supporting people with neurodiversity, planning their weddings. So yeah, if you're finding that you're not being terribly well represented in your wedding planning journey, or you'd really like to share your own wisdom, we'd love to hear from you. Basically, we would love to hear from you. So drop us a line. You can find myself, Glorious by Heidi, on Instagram. Ross Wilshire Photography on Instagram. Am I right?
I am indeed. Yes, that's me.
And you can also find Your Individual Wedding on Instagram as well, so you can contact us directly there. We would absolutely love to hear from you if you want to be interviewed for the next series. And as always, we would love your comments. We would love you to subscribe to the podcast, not just this most recent series. There's an absolute wealth of information there in previous series if you are planning your wedding. And please recommend us to other people and share the love.